the world is hitting you with microaggressions or macroaggressions, right? And sexism and classism and, just plain foolish, nasty people. Like, how do you do that? Jesus was able to do it. Here's my suggestion outside of this text. We're going to understand that God empowers us with gifts to do this. Galatians 5 talks about fruit of the Spirit: love, patience, kindness, self-control, temperance is self-control. So there are things that God will allow us to be able to do the impossible, right? To be able. And we're not expected to always, how can I put it? So my car, right? Somebody I feel like scratched my car today, hurt my feelings. I look on the side, did somebody key the car? Did somebody, I don't know. I think somebody's leaning on the car and scratched the car. The car doesn't look the way that I want the car to look, but look, the car is running. The car is hurting, but the car is running. Right? I was talking about me running. My knees sometimes gonna hurt, but I'm still, because sometimes when we're building, we might not be at 100%. Our max capacity may only be 80%. Mm-hmm. But if our max capacity is 80%, and then we're, let's say, operating, and we only need 60%, mm-hmm. that gives us 20% that we can work with to help, to heal, to do for other people. Questions, comments, thoughts, pushbacks before I move on to another portion of scripture. So he heals them, he has compassion on them. Late in the afternoon, right? Because there's what? Reverend Dr. says 5,000 people. It takes a long time to heal 5,000 people. Healing. They're like, yo, this isn't cool. It was healing people. Let's go home. Send the people home. Mm-hmm. Send the people home so they can go to the surrounding villages and find their own food, find their own lodging, because we're in a remote place. Jesus then says to them, you feed them. So two things happened, and I'm going to ask you what happened. What did the disciples not do?
What did they not do?
Yeah, what didn't they do? So they're looking at everything. I won't say they did do it, but I just want to suggest they did it improperly. They're looking, and they're seeing all of the people, mm-hmm. and they're looking
at the impossible.
So,
I'm forgetting that they were with Jesus.
I heard. They count the cost. Mm-hmm. They looked at all of these people. They said, there's a handful of us. 12 of them, Jesus. I believe the women were there also, because the women were always there, mm-hmm. right? Probably 4 or 5 women as well. They counted the cost and felt as if they were not able to serve the people because the task looked like it was too big. Mm-hmm. They didn't have the resources. Jesus says, you give them something to eat. They said, we have only 5 loaves and 2 fish. So they knew the resources. Mm-hmm. So the problem wasn't that they didn't count the cost. Mm-hmm. The problem wasn't that they didn't understand. It wasn't that they didn't understand what the resources were that they were working with. They didn't have. They knew what the resources were. They just didn't know how to stretch the resources.
That's good.
Right? And this faith thing that we deal with is about learning how to stretch. Mm-hmm. Maturity is about learning how to stretch. Don't believe me? Here's an example. Somebody ever work your nerves? Somebody say, they're doing it. What's that? You see that movie? What's that? In Hitch? What's the matter? You're doing it now. That's the best scene in the movie. So let's not talk about a regular person that's working your nerves. nurse, right? If you're at home watching this, working your nurse, it's kind of vernacular for saying that somebody is annoying you, right? And so somebody annoys you, but let's say the person that annoys you is your boss, your supervisor, your direct reporter.
Oh, Jesus, Lord.
Right? So then when it's your direct reporter, right, you have to react a certain way, right? Because you don't want to get written up, you don't want to get in trouble, you don't want to lose a job, because the accounting code says, I have bills.
I got bills to pay.
Right? So where you may normally tell somebody about themselves, you might have to stretch your patience, hold your mouth,
self-control,
pray a little more, right? It's knowing the resources and seeing what you can do with the resources in order to make it through the moment. Here's a dope thing though. Jesus already knows. He asks questions, you feed them. That's what he says. What do you have, right? Please somebody read
14.
13.
Luke 13.
No, when you were
Okay.
Luke 9.
13.
13.
If you got it, I don't got it.
Okay, he replied, you give them something to eat.
You give them something to eat. We don't have anything, Jesus. We have this little bit of food. This is not enough food to even feed. It's not enough food to feed the 12 of us.
Mm-hmm.
But he's saying you give them something to eat. So clearly, like literally, I feel like it was 2020 and we're like, Jesus' math isn't mathing right. What's going on? You're telling us to feed these people. We only have a little bit of food. You sent us out here in the previous scripture. What they did, they was casting out demons. They were healing the sick. You know what they were not doing? They weren't breaking fish and bread up enough to feed. This is something that they haven't done before.
Right.
Go down to the next verse. As Reverend Donegan said in the story, have them sit down in groups of about 50 each. He already had a plan for the resources that they thought weren't enough resources in order to feed the people. Don't you know that when you're trying to build something, God has counted the cost. God has a plan, right? Come on, Jeremiah 29.
I'm using that.
I know the plans that I have for you.
Right.
God has the plan before you think to build, before you count the cost. You have to trust, because one of the most important things to build in faith and in life is trust. Pushback, thoughts, questions, comments. I see it in faces.
I saw something today and it was just like, God gives you the plan, God walks with you during the plan, and God will never leave you. Mm-hmm. So even when we're counting the cost for the plan that's already been set up for us to do good, as you know, for his people, we will never fail. I think we fail when we can't see the cost. We can't see God in the plan or the ending results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? And if we don't count it properly, as we see up here, then we feel as if we're being ridiculed, right? Now the truth is, we shouldn't worry about what other people talk about us, right? I was gonna say, right? Say, kick rocks if you talk, right? That's it. You know, like, somebody gonna see this, I'm gonna get myself in trouble. And so, but that's it, right? God has this plan, and it all seems supernatural and super mystical. And how can God have this plan for my life if I can't see God, right? Mm-hmm. How can God have this plan for my life? Like, how can God like help me use a degree that, like, at the time that I was getting it was like one of the premier degrees, and now there are computers taking over my job. How does God help me? When there wasn't a computer, there was no computers in the first century when Jesus was walking, right? Like, those are the questions that we have to ask, or that's the place where we have to be able to trust God, right? But it's all cost counting, right? Because he says he had a plan. You give him something to eat. Because we have to actively participate in this, right? You give them something to eat, they're like, okay, this is all we have. He's like, no, sit him down. They sit him down. He does something which is really amazing. Taking the 5 fish and the loaves, he does what? He takes the fish and the loaves, he gives thanks, he breaks them, he distributes them. That's a cycle that is very important in the New Testament, right? The taking, the blessing, the breaking, the giving, right? We see that when he's eating with his disciples on the last night of his life. We celebrate that when we celebrate the Lord's Supper, right? And what if I tell you that I want to suggest that that's what God does with us, right? So next week, Minister Johnson's going to talk about destiny. The week after that, she's going to talk about identity as it connects to counting the cost, right? 2 Sundays and 3 Sundays from now, not this Sunday, but the next 2 Sundays, Reverend Dennis is going to talk about counting the cost as it is connected to the cost of being a disciple. On Sunday, Minister Johnson will be talking about storing your treasure in heaven as it's connected to counting the costs. Because there's different ways. She's like, wait a minute. Well, that may be what the but I want to suggest in that, as we change and as we grow and as we become who we are as believers, part of it is Jesus realizing that in order to do ministry, is God realizing that in order to do ministry, he needs people to do the ministry. Right? Like, turkeys don't get cooked and cut up by themselves. Right? People in nursing homes don't get visited. They don't sit there and there's a visit by themselves. Right? Tears don't get wiped if nobody's there to wipe the tears. God needs us to count the cost. What's it going to take? It's going to take thousands and millions and billions of people to serve the thousands and millions and billions of people in the world. God counted the cost and trusts us with the mission. Right? Go ye therefore. One Lord, one faith, one baptism. Go ye therefore. Teach it. Baptize it. Right? See, Luke 4, I'm going to jump out for a second. I'm going to jump out of Luke 9 for a second. I'm going to read Luke 4, Luke chapter 4. Reading around about the 18th verse. This is a charge to anybody that's listening to this. Jesus says, the Spirit of the Lord is on me. Luke chapter 4, verse 18. The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom to the prisoners and recovery for sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Right? This is Jesus saying that this is what Jesus' mission was. They got mad at Jesus for having this mission, right? I want to say the first miracle, before I tell you what I'm going to say, Jesus stood up and he read the scroll. Amazing in itself, right? Because, again, I say all the time, the literacy rate back then was 1%. So the fact that Jesus is reading is amazing, right? But he's reading this, and he's saying that this is his mission, and if we're followers of Christ, then that should be our mission too, right? Because, again, he needs thousands and millions of people to serve the thousands and millions of people of the world. He understands that there are costs. He's putting the trust and the faith that we can do it. And here's the thing. if we are to proclaim the good news to the poor, we have to do a good job of recognizing who the poor are.
Ooh.
Don't you know that sometimes we sit on the pews with people who put on their best, they're poor in spirit, they're poor in their vision of their self, what is that, self-worth it's called? They are economically poor. And we're assuming that since they're in First Central looking in a particular way, that they either have it all together or they have it together enough that we don't have to love on them. We don't even realize that there's some poor among us. So we have to learn how to recognize who the poor are, right? Some of them, they're easy, but some of them we can't tell. Recognize who the prisoners are. It's easy to go and visit, a correctional facility and say, that somebody's a prisoner, right? But how about somebody that's in an abusive relationship? Right? How you doing today? What's going on? I fell down the stairs. How many times you fallen down the stairs? You're going to recognize. And then, the truth is you might see somebody that's imprisoned in a non-correctional facility situation. Two things need to happen. One, you have to recognize it. Two, before you act, you have to count the cost yourself and see if you have the capacity to minister to that person. Yeah. You might not have the capacity, but you can have the capacity to pray and pray to somebody else. And sometimes prayer is not enough. Maybe you give the person a card. Here's a therapist. Here's somebody who's gone through it. Right? Because God is asking us to do these things, right? Recovery site for the blind. Again, it's one of those things. We're in a place, the former president, the one who's about to go to jail, but who might be crazy situation, right? The former president.
Right.
He made everything fake news so that people deny facts. Just deny facts. For 8 years, this man was saying that the president before him was not a citizen. Right. Literally, people still believe that to the day. Because they are intentionally blind. Do we know some people? Right? So again, that's just, when we're talking about serving the people, we serve the people this way. Right? But we want to make sure that we're not overshooting because it makes us comfortable to be able to serve somebody that we may not have to see week in and week out. Because it's easier, right? It's easier to be in a space, serve and walk, and not have to follow. Right? Again, we have to count our costs to see what our capacity is. I'm almost finished. Go back to Luke chapter 9. Can somebody, my computer is, what's going on here with this?
Luke chapter 9?
Yeah, Luke chapter 9, we are 10 to 17, right? I don't know what's going on with my computer.
Is it charged?
No, it's like, I know what's going on. You're in the wrong window. So this is what goes. He takes. So what I was saying, where I was going, is that God needs millions, thousands, billions of people to serve the billions and billions of people. Do you know that when you gave your life to Christ, God received you? God took you. If I was a gambling man, I would say that there are some things in your life that you feel hurt you, left your little heart broken. Life broke you. But when God took you, and even in the breaking, God blessed you. You can learn from the breaking. You can share your story with somebody that has the same kind of breaking, right? Because God took you and anointed your brokenness, that's a blessing, and then gives us all back to the world to serve. And we say we're counting the cost. It doesn't cost us too much, but it costs us everything. It cost Jesus everything, but it didn't cost Jesus too much. It cost Jesus every ounce of his life. He died. He was murdered. Just to let you know, right? We say he died. He laid down his life. But he died because the religious leaders didn't like him. So they went to snitch to the government. They murdered him. They just didn't know they were murdering God, but they murdered him. He died. He rose with all power. We received the Holy Spirit, right? For us, the things that the world needs from us, the things the world needs the most, are not things that are attached to finances. So I say they don't cost that much, but they do cost a lot because they're things that we can never get back once we get them. Some time, right? Think about somebody in your life that spent some extra time with you. Right? Going through listen, tell two stories. My grandfather passed away in 1999. I had Mo, Minister Hall, I'm sorry. I threw a tantrum. I was in the church. I'm running this youth group. I'm going in Sundays. I'm trying to answer this call of prayer. I'm never doing nothing for you again. Right? That's me. 20, 21. Deacon, now Reverend Borders, comes over and like, listen, yo, I don't know what you're going through because I never experienced it. But I'm telling you, you know him. Trust God. Right? But I'm going through. I'm going through. That little speech that he said to me has stayed with me my entire life. He had some things to do. He didn't have a relationship with my grandfather. He did not need to be at that funeral. He stopped by because he wanted to be there to support the members of my family that he knew. He'll never get back that time. Before he walked out the door, he had to make a decision. What's it going to cost me? I go there. It's going to be awkward because lifetimes are awkward. If I'm needed, maybe I'll say something that'll encourage him. And he did. He'll never get the time back. But it blessed me in ways that I can't explain, right? I just explained it, but I can't really explain, right? The things that when we're as disciples given to the world are the things that other people can't give the way that we give it. Right? So somebody can give time. Right? I have a friend, his answer to everything is sleep with that person.
What?
I'm being honest. I'm trying to show contrast.
What's the question?
What? Any question.
Any questions?
Had a rough day on my job. Go find you some.
Oh.
We're fighting. If you do this, then you two will be in a better place. His answer to everything is this. Right? That's not the answer to everything. It just isn't. And even because at times, in very specific situations, in very specific relationships, that is the answer. Because his approach is, this is the answer for everything, it kind of cheapens the answer. Right? You understand? Right? You understand?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know if y'all said Reverend is telling you to go out there. And so, yeah, 801, 21 things. So they gave the disciples distributed to pick up. They ate up all were satisfied. The disciples picked up 12 baskets, and there were leftovers. Here's another thing that's interesting. We talk about counting the cost, God's economy, and you saying the math ain't mathing right. God knows the resources before we give them. Remember I talked about sometimes your capacity, your top capacity is 80%. It's like your cell phone, right? Like when you first buy your cell phone charges at 100%. When you first buy your phone, when it's full charge, the battery is 100%. After a year, when it's full charge, it's probably like 80%. That's why when you charge your phone up, it dies quicker. Because the battery doesn't have the capacity that it had when you first got it. Here's the thing with God. God, no matter if we're operating at 180, 50, 15, has the ability to make sure that there's just enough left over for us that we can be taken care of. So when we're building, when we're counting the costs, we feel like we're getting discouraged. Just as I understand that God got us, right? And He can carry us through. Any questions, comments, thoughts before I give you? Let's do homework. Do homework tonight? Reverend Donnegan said, I have enough homework.
I do not do homework.
I'm not.
I'm telling you
She said,
now.
I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. Okay, so then I'll ask you to consider doing this if you would like to do this, right? I like to journal, right? You know, I like to write. So I'm going to give you a writing assignment. You do it or you don't do it, right? Identify one thing in your life that you would like God to move.
Move?
To move in, right?
Oh, move in.
Move in. Yeah. Oh, it can be move, right? It can be like in your personal space, you want God to remove something. It can be, I need a new job. I want God to give me a new job. I want God to speak to me so I can figure out what I should be doing with ministry, right? I want to learn how to be more patient. I'm just throwing some things out, right? Something that you want God to assist you in doing. Right? You've been working on it by yourself, perhaps, or maybe you have yet to start doing it, right? Identify that thing. You don't have to identify it now. Once that thing is identified, count the cost. I want you to write down what you see needs to be done in order for that to happen. Right? So that's part. First thing, identify. Second thing, write down what you need to do in order for it to happen. Third thing is, in writing down what you need, this is a 4-part homework question. This is a 4-part homework on my thing. In identifying what it is that you need to do, then identify the things that you are capable of doing. Not necessarily that you can do easily, but that you're capable of doing. Some might be easy, some may be things that you struggle with a little bit, right? So, for example, like losing weight is one that everybody around the beginning of the year didn't want to lose weight, right? I've learned that you have to change your diet, right? You can't work out past your... And you could be the same weight and your pants don't fit. It don't make no sense to me. And then the fourth thing, right? So you're gonna write the thing, you're gonna identify the things. You're going to identify what you can do. The fourth thing is after you identify what you can do and what you can't do, ask God to show you how this is possible with God filling in the things that you can't do. Write yourself a letter. Put your address on that letter. Put that letter in the mail. Give that letter to a friend. Tell the friend to mail it to you next year. Now see what happens. So that when you receive a letter from yourself about this date, 12 months from now, we'll see what God has done and what you have done. It'll be a surprise. Like, hey, I forgot that I had this thing going on. That's a homework for tonight. That's it. That's it. A little different look at the passage. But that's it. So we can pray. Are there any prayer requests? Specific prayer? What I'll do is you could